Hey everyone, Professor Warsi again. You have studied contrastive discourse markers with me before. That was the first lesson. And today I'm going to present some more examples of English contrastive discourse markers. You may be familiar with some of them. One of the most common contrastive discourse markers is but. But today we will study but, although, however, in contrast, in comparison, nevertheless, instead, and on the other hand. So let's begin. Contrastive discourse markers. They are words or phrases that link two opposite ideas, and this is important to understand. They're called contrastive because they connect two ideas that are opposite in meaning. For example, John was late in leaving, but he arrived on time, which is not the result one would expect. If you hear somebody was late in leaving, then we just assume that he probably arrived late, not on time. But John did. So let's look at some more example sentences of contrastive discourse markers. First, but. It's very common, right? People use but all the time. John is a politician, but he's honest. I love you, but I still won't do the dishes. That's a funny statement, right? Tom is very intelligent, but he's not at all arrogant. He's not mean. Okay, so that is how you use but. Next is however, and sometimes people make mistakes using the however as a contrastive discourse markers in terms of punctuation, but I'll explain that to you in a second. So however is a contrastive discourse marker that connects two different ideas. So John gave toys to Mary, however Sarah gave dolls to Jane. So there are two different things happening. John gave Mary toys, but Sarah gave Jane dolls. So that's the contrast. Toys and dolls. John is tall, however, Sam is short. So tall and short. The cook fried the onions, however, she steamed the cabbage. So as you can see, however connects two ideas that are not similar in meaning. Okay, on the other hand. Now, let me explain something very important. On the other hand refers to the same subject. This is important. So when a person, either in writing or in a speech, says on the other hand, they are referring to the same subject. For example, on the one hand we could leave, on the other hand we could stay. So notice that both sentences have we. It means the subject or the agent is the same. Another example, on the one hand, my car isn't very attractive. On the other hand, it does get us there. So notice that the car is common in both sentences, right? On the other hand is referring to the car. That's not very good looking. It's not very attractive. It's probably old, but it drives. It drives well. It gets people to their destination, wherever they need to get to. Okay? So 3, 4, 5. Review these sentences before we move on. Next up, in contrast. John is fat. In contrast, Jim is thin. So there are two people who are being compared. John is fat. You could also say John is fat, but Jim is thin. But you could end a sentence with a period. John is fat, period. Next sentence, a contrastive discourse marker. In contrast, comma, Jim is thin. Right? I don't care for peas. In contrast, I don't like carrots either. So these are some examples of in contrast. Okay. In comparison. Now it's important to know that in contrast connects to different ideas, And in comparison, this contrastive discourse marker compares something similar. So notice the first sentence, John weighs 150 pounds. In comparison, not in contrast, but in comparison, Jim weighs 152 pounds. So the common, do you see what common is in this sentence? Weight, right? How much John weighs and how much Jim weighs. So the topic of that sentence is weight. Okay, it rained hard yesterday. In comparison, comma, it only drizzled today. So they're both about rain. All right, so I think you get a sense. Costa Rica and the US, they're both countries, but here democracy is compared. They're both democracies. And thus we use in comparison. Okay, conversely, you could leave, period. Conversely, comma, we could stay. So these sentences are example of the contrastive discourse marker, conversely. Nevertheless, my colleague, Professor Humphreys, was telling me the other day, I said, we spent a half an hour just discussing nevertheless, how to use it. So I think it's important. We started late, the first example, period. Nevertheless, we arrived on time. Now you may be saying, I could also use however, and you are correct. We could say we started late, period. However, we arrived on time. So in that sense, nevertheless and however are similar. Okay? All right. Instead. Now, instead connects two sentences wherein the second sentence is an option. Right? And also a result of something. It's almost like a cause and effect relationship there. Jane didn't go to school today, so what did she do? Maybe she had a headache. Instead, she stayed home and slept. Rather than going to school, she slept. Maybe she was tired, exhausted, or had a headache. Harry won't take the letter off the table. Instead, he will just leave it. So, see the four example sentences and notice the highlighted word instead, a contrastive discourse marker. So study this before you move on. Okay? On the contrary. Now the first sentence I threw in that word is a bad word, so try not to use it unless you are very, very angry, mad at somebody. Fred is not a gentleman. He's not a nice person. He's nasty. On the contrary, comma, he's a bastard. Now, just remember it's a bad word, so be very careful when you use this. People will not like it if you call them a bastard. Okay, so on the contrary, quite the contrary, on the contrary, this is a contrastive discourse marker. He didn't win first prize, for example. Look at number 4. He didn't win first prize, period. On the contrary, he won 2 first prizes. See? Just the opposite of what one would expect. All right, so 2 quick exercises I need you to do. It's always a good idea to practice what you learn. So there are examples of discourse markers, right, before these sentences. Use one of them to fill in the blanks in the sentences 1 through 8. So there are 8 sentences with something missing. So pick one of these contrastive discourse markers, okay, in blue, and see which one fits where, right? You have 8 sentences and 8 contrastive discourse markers. Do this exercise, pause the video now, stop it here, and then complete the exercise. And as always, if you have been taking lessons with me, I will show you the answer so you can compare your answers. Okay, so these are the answers. I'll go over just one and I need you to study the rest of them. Number 1, we were late in leaving home, period. Nevertheless, we arrived on time. Okay? So if you learn the contrastive discourse markers really well, not only can you use them in speech, but also, for your professors when you write essays. Okay? These are very important. So you can contrast two sentences, or two opposite ideas, with these contrastive discourse markers. Let's do one more exercise before we end this lesson. You've already done the first exercise, so this should be easy for you. Just continue on. Connect these sentences, all 8 of them. There are 2 sentences in each, and use the contrastive discourse markers to fill in the blanks. Here are the answers for your reference and practice, because you need to keep writing. Write in English and use these contrastive discourse markers to write completely grammatically correct sentences. Okay, so there are some more discourse markers, and these are just for your reference. There are too many here, so I can't possibly give you an example sentence for each one of them. This is something you'll have to study on your own. Read more, write more, look up these contrastive discourse markers. Some of them are, actually most of them are not contrastive, they're simply discourse markers. As a logical conclusion, as a result, these are all transition words, but they're discourse markers too. All right? Okay, so let's just quickly summarize. We learned today that contrastive discourse markers connect or link two opposite ideas, and that is why they're called contrastive. Okay, they include, what are they? Some of them I've given you examples just to refresh your memory what you've just learned. They include however, despite this, instead, on the contrary, in contrast. We also learn in comparison. And contrastive discourse markers improve clarity and cohesion. Okay, so that's about it. That's the lesson for today. Moving on, I will start putting together lessons on writing. If you are a college student, you will most likely write papers, an academic essay for your professor. So we will start learning the very basics, fundamentals of academic writing. Until then, keep studying. I have a lot more lessons for you to study. Any questions, write them in the comment box. Practice. Practice is very important. Practice makes perfect. So whatever you learn, apply your knowledge. Read more, write more, speak more. Speak to native English speakers. Listen to them as they speak to you, and continue to work hard. I will see you in the next video. Take care.